I am going to hand over to this evening again to James Harding Morris, who is going to be talking to us about some further online resources. So, without any further ado, I'll hand over to you, James. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chantel, and lovely to see you all here again this evening for another one of these wonderful talks. Let me just share my screen and we can get sorted. So, what I'm going about this evening is other online botanical resources. As you can see, they're fantastic and free. But before we jump straight on into talking about resources, I thought it'd be fun to recap how the challenge going. As you can see here, for some reason, I've put how is the challenge going as a little mistake I've just noticed. But the great news is that 805 people have submitted records via our iRecord activity, which is fantastic. And together you have submitted a staggering 19,761 records of 885 species. And I put those figures in a few hours ago. And actually, I think they're already out of date. I think we're even closer to 20,000 records than before. So that is absolutely incredible work by you all. The 5 species that are the most frequently recorded as part of this challenge are lesser celandine, red dead nettle, primrose, daisy, and bluebell. And then the picture here is of cuckoo flower, which is one of my personal favourites, is in 6th place. 7th place is wood anemone, 8th is garlic mustard, 9th is white dead nettle, and 10th is ground ivy. It's going to be really interesting over the coming weeks to see which species continue to rise or which, as their season comes to an end, lesser celandine, there's only a few more weeks until lesser celandine becomes quite subtle. We might see that start to drop down the rankings as other species like daisy become recorded even more frequently. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that goes. But anyway, on with tonight's topic, more online resources to help you with the challenge. So, online resources. You may have heard of this thing. It's called the internet, and I think it's going to be the next big thing, a game changer, probably. And using the internet, you can access all sorts of incredible resources, such as the BSBI website. Now, I'm assuming that because this is the BSBI's 100 Plants Challenge, you may have visited the BSBI website already. And if you have and you've explored it, I apologize for reiterating it, but there is a gold mine of information for you on this website. We have, in fact, an entire page that you may or may not have discovered yet, just on identification guides. And those identification guides run from, some quite tricky and obscure species groups that I wouldn't say that you need to kind of worry about at your stage of botany, but there are some great guides in there that could be incredibly useful tackling kind of more familiar groups, such as mouse ears. If anyone's been out and about at the moment, they will be spotting mouse ears. Is it common mouse ear? Is it sticky mouse ear? Are you bumping into little mouse ear? If you're on the coast, sea mouse ear. So that mouse ear guide, really useful. Similarly, chickweeds and stitchworts. We're seeing lots of records of greater stitchwort, occasional records of bog stitchwort. But then, of course, there's also common chickweed and lesser chickweed, and this guide will help unpick them. Buttercups are suddenly bursting into bloom everywhere. And of course, there's the big 3 buttercups of lots of different types of grassland: creeping buttercup, meadow buttercup, and bulbous buttercup. And that guide will help unpick them. And then, of course, we have what is probably one of the best plant groups in Britain, the speedwells. Are you finding field speedwells? Are you finding Germander speedwell, wood speedwell, ivy-leaved speedwell. There are a lot of different speedwells. Each one of them is absolutely exquisite, and that guide will help you unpick them. And then beyond the BSBI website, there is the BSBI YouTube channel. And what I've done here is I've just taken a snapshot of some of the videos that are available on the BSBI YouTube channel. There are over 350 videos on the BSBI YouTube channel, and quite a lot of them are to do with identification. Getting started with plant keys. We've done a talk that talks a bit about kind of ID guides and a bit about plant keys. You might have encountered keys if you've bought an identification guide to help you this year. Getting started with plant keys, if you want any support with that, that's a great guide to help. We've also got grasses, sedges, and rushes for absolute beginners. Now, grasses, sedges, and rushes, I think, are a bit trickier than your kind of normal, familiar flowering plants. But if you're interested in starting to understand the anatomy of plants, of grasses, sedges, and rushes, and understand the difference between grasses, sedges, and rushes, this talk is fantastic. We've got an introduction to aquatic plant identification, and also a video about identifying the different families of wildflowers. If you can start to recognize wildflower families, you can find a mysterious plant, and you can flick to the right page in your book. But there's also other videos that might be useful for you. Urban Plants of Newcastle. That video is going to be packed full of interesting urban species. Yes, in Newcastle, but a lot of those species are going to be found in other urban areas around the country as well. And then we've got this wonderful talk by one of our Vice County recorders, Helena, about the treasures of Somerset. And so if you are somebody based in Somerset or near Somerset, that video could be eye-opening to the wonderful species that are found there, but also may tell you about interesting other species that you might want to track down yourself. And of course, this is just 6 videos that I've picked to show you here. There are over 350 videos on the BSBI YouTube channel, all worth a look. And what I'll say before I continue is we're going to, if you're there going, how do I find the BSBI website? Where is the identification page? Don't worry, we're going to share with you the links to all of the sites that I'm going to mention tonight and a few more so that you can explore them at your leisure, so you can watch this knowing that you don't have to be taking notes right now. Another fantastic website is Plant Atlas 2020. This is an absolutely incredible website. It is based off the BSBI data that we have been collecting for decades and decades and decades. And of course, the kind of data that you are all now supplying to us, maybe one day will feed into a future atlas. But what this means is for every single native species in Britain and Ireland, as well as a huge number of non-native species, basically all non-native species, except for the rarest of rare aliens, have a page on Plant Atlas. And a page on Plant Atlas looks something like this. I have, celebrating the fact that Lesser Celandine is one of our most popularly recorded species so far. I've looked up the page for Lesser Celandine, and you can see that the entirety, just about, of Britain and Ireland is covered with dots showing that Lesser Celandine either is currently recorded there or has been recorded there in the last 20 years, or in some areas you can see there are light greyish dots. You can see a few of those around the Highlands of Scotland, and you can even see some blank squares in the Highlands of Scotland showing that Lesser Celandine is everywhere apart from possibly the highest altitudes. And you can see there's also a description here of Lesser Celandine, a bit about it, and you can look up any species on Plant Atlas and get a diagram like this showing the distribution. And that can be really, really handy for if you found something and you think it might be a little bit unusual, you can look on Plant Atlas and Plant Atlas can tell you its distribution. And it might be that if you found something a little unusual, well, actually, Plant Atlas tells you you are exactly where you should be to find that species. Or conversely, it might say that the species you think you found has never been recorded where you are, which doesn't mean necessarily that you're wrong, because species do turn up in new places, and that's part of the wonder of botany. But that can be a great reason to kind of double check your identification or share your record with an expert to try and pin down exactly what that identification is. And you can see across the top here, there's also a gallery of photographs. That's an option at the top there. And it also, there's a tab for phenology as well. Anyway, we'll come back to Plant Atlas in a moment. We also have maps on the BSBI website as well. Here is the map on the BSBI website for Lesser Celandine again. You might be wondering what's the difference between Plant Atlas and these maps on the BSBI website. The difference is the maps on the BSBI website are, in inverted commas, they're live. The Plant Atlas was published in 2023 based on data up until 2020, and those distribution maps will not change. That is a published document. The maps on the BSBI website will continue to be updated with new records. And in fact, some of the records that you submitted back at the beginning of this challenge in January and February might possibly have also already fed through into the BSBI database and be reflected on these maps right now. So what I'm going to just do for a moment is reappear in front of you like this. And I'm just going to show you a little bit of Plant Atlas and a little bit of the distribution maps on our website, so you can see a bit more about how you could play with them. So I'm just going back to sharing, and I am sharing theory. And let me zoom in a bit so it's a bit more visible for you. So you can type in vernacular names, common names, or you can type in scientific names. So we can type in something like daisy, and we can go to the daisy page, and we can see that daisy has been recorded pretty much everywhere. We can go to the gallery and we can see some pictures of daisies, and we can go to the phenology tab, which shows us down here. It shows us that daisies tend to flower from March to October. And you can see here, this graph here is showing us kind of when most records are submitted, which gives you a sense of when daisies are most visible and recordable. We can also look for something a bit rarer than a daisy, like, what about something fun like bird's nest orchid? So you can see bird's nest orchid flowering and visible June to July, and you can see that it's this kind of detectability curve here. There's a lot of records made in May and June and into July here. If we look at the summary here, you can see that bird's nest orchid is a lot more patchily distributed than Lesser Celandine or daisy. Quite a lot of records in the south. And you might be looking at these and realizing these dots are different colors. Well, a solid black dot tells us that a species has been recorded there in the past 20 years. And then as those colors get lighter, it shows us how long ago that species was last recorded there. And so on this map, you can see that in the kind of history of recording, bird's nest orchid has been recorded in lots of places that it is no longer recorded today. Has the species been lost? In a lot of these cases, probably yes. In some of these cases, it could be waiting for someone to re-find it. Maybe some of you will go out and re-find species in sites where they were formerly known. At the moment, I'm looking at the overview map, but I can also move to the zoomable map, which means I can zoom in, and I can zoom in close to where I live and see that historically bird's nest orchid was once recorded not too far away from me, but hasn't been recorded there since pre-1930. So it's been over 100 years. So that seems a bit unlikely that I'll go out and re-find it, but you know what? I might try one day. So that's Plant Atlas, a really, really fantastic resource. The other one that I share with you is the BSPI distribution maps that I showed you a snippet of on my presentation. So I'm just going to open up the BSPI distribution now. I'll give you a link to this, don't worry. And in here, you can type in whatever species you're interested in. So let's try bird's nest orchid on here. It's going to be a very similar distribution, as you can see. But the great thing about the distribution maps on our website is not only are they being updated post Atlas, but also the squares that we use to plot their distribution are smaller. On Plant Atlas, it's showing you 10-kilometer squares. On the BSPI website, it is showing you tetrad level data, 4-kilometer squares. So you can zoom in a bit further, and I can see that somewhere around here, a bird's nest orchid has been recorded somewhere in this 4-kilometer square at Langton Hill at some point in the last 20 years. So that is a really, really useful resource. We can also see, gosh, look down here in Gloucestershire. That's an absolute hotbed of bird's nest orchids down here. Lots and lots and lots of squares over here. And we can also see that there's some around here are we in Surrey here, or maybe we're in Sussex, and also down running from Sussex across to the edge of Hampshire, quite a lot of records of bird's nest orchid as well. And so you can get a really good sense of the distribution of species, and that can be really good for double checking your records. Little divergence there into just showing you a little bit more about how some of those websites work. I'm just going to re-share my screen with you, and we'll get back. So I've just shown you Plant Atlas, I've just shown you the BSPI distribution maps, but there are other great websites online that can be really, really useful. One that I'm a fan of is the Flora of East Anglia, an identification guide. Now, I don't live in East Anglia, I live in Lincolnshire, but the great thing is that most common plants are found everywhere. And so Flora of East Anglia is a really useful resource for common, widespread and familiar species, a lot of the species that you are going to be tackling this year. And what I like about this is that it has photographs of species, and it often has photographs of the features of species. One species pair that I always used to forget about the difference between them was hairy bittercress and wavy bittercress. And I'm sure some of you watching this are going, yes, James, we've encountered bittercresses. And the key feature for separating them is the number of stamens. One of them has 4 stamens, one of them has 6 stamens. The problem was for a long time, I could never get it in my head whether it was hairy bittercress or wavy bittercress that had 4 stamens or 6 stamens. And so I found the Flora of East Anglia website really useful, because I'd be on my phone out and about, I'd see a bittercress, I'd realise I'd forgotten which way around it is, and I'd quickly Google Flora East Anglia wavy bittercress. And they will have a page And here you can see it's got a description of both species, and it gives you a bit of information about both of them. But I've highlighted here, one says 4 stamens, one says 6 stamens, and even better, you can see that picture at the top left there. There is a photograph of a flower showing the 4 stamens. And at the bottom right, you can see in the waving bittercress, the flower showing the 6 stamens. So handy. Of course, if you've got a book in your back pocket or in your bag, you can double check the book. But sometimes you're out and about without the book, or sometimes it's just easier to just open your phone than it is to get your book out and flip to the right page. So I like Flora East Anglia for just a quick double check of some common and familiar species. Another website that is great for quickly double checking a species ID, a bit like this, is Nature Spot. Nature Spot is about the wildlife and wild places of Leicestershire and Rutland. It is not totally wild flower focused. It also has invertebrates and birds, mammals, and everything, but it has pages for most of the plants recorded in Leicestershire and Rutland, which includes, once again, all of the common ones that sometimes you just want to double check. So another species pair that I think is easy to forget the difference between is dove's foot cranesbill and small flowered cranesbill. And the Nature Spot website can be handy just to open it up on your phone, read what it says, and look at the photos. So here's what it says about dove's foot cranesbill. It says it's a low to short, densely and softly hairy, semi-prostrate plant. And the key thing here is it says that it has stems with long white hairs. And you can see this middle picture here at the bottom, that the stem here and the flower stem here has these long white hairs. And you can even see it on this picture at the bottom right here, really long white hairs. Now, if we compare that with the page for small flowered cranesbill, we can see that on the description, it says the hairs on the leaf stalks are all short. And then it's got an ID checklist as well down here. Small flowers, pedicels, which is the flowering stem, with hair all short. And if we look at these pictures, particularly these middle 2 pictures here, we can see that the flowering stem has hairs, but it's a very short, downy fuzz of hairs rather than those long, hairy hairs of the dove's foot cranesbill. You can also see from this picture as well that small flowered cranesbill is, as the name suggests, it has a smaller looking flower, or certainly it has wider gaps between the petals. But this is where these websites are really useful. You can be looking at a species, you can be thinking in your head, is it dove's foot cranesbill? Is it small flowered cranesbill? Is it hairy bittercress? Is it wavy bittercress? And you can look at these websites and get some photographs to help you. I do think that the photos and illustrations in most of the ID books are very good, but it can sometimes be really, really helpful to see multiple photos from different angles and get a real sense of the features that you're looking for. So that is Nature Spot. Another website that could be handy for you is Floral Images. This is a website made by one of our Vice County recorders, John Crellin of Breconshire in Wales. And it has loads and loads and loads of photographs and information on there. But one thing that I think could be quite nice as a useful tool is you'll see on this bar on the left with all those links, one of them is flowers by colour up in the top left there. And if you click on flowers by colour, it takes you to a list of pages in which it shows the plants with flowers of that color. So it shows there's a page of blue flowers, a page of brown flowers, a page of dark blue flowers, dark purple flowers, green flowers, orange flowers, yellow flowers, white flowers, etc., etc. So if you find something that you are totally unfamiliar with, you're struggling with your identification book, whatever, it could be that this website will be useful for you because you can click on one of these colors, browse through the photos, and maybe bump into the species you're looking for. And then, of course, you can double check it in the book, you can double check it on Plant Atlas, you can double check it on the BSBI website, and hopefully confirm that identification. Let's imagine I've clicked on green flowers. Here is a page on floral images of plants with green flowers. And we can see there's wonderful things on there like Moschatal. Some of you might have bumped into Moschatal, one of my favorite flowers. There's Lords and Ladies, which I think many of you will have bumped into, and even more of you will see in the coming weeks. There's opposite-leaved golden saxifrage, there's spurge laurel. I'm sure there'll be green hellebore in there as well. I can see some of the orchids like the helleborines, which have greenish flowers as well. So that is another website and another method of helping get a sense of what a mystery plant might be. Another website that really aims to support people with identification, and this one is new and I think absolutely fantastic, is Name That Plant, a website by Richard Milne. Once again, we're going to share all the links with you, don't worry. And this website has a method of taking you through plant identification. And Richard has produced a video for us, which gives us an example of working through the website and reaching an identification. So if all of this works, I am going to go on to the next slide. And then in theory, this video should play for you all from Richard himself.
Do you want to learn to identify plants? There are well over 1,000 native flowering plants in Britain and Ireland, plus several thousand non-natives that can also be found in the wild. So it can be very challenging to get started, especially if you're a beginner. So, I've built a website called Name That Plant to help you. Name That Plant is much more than an identification app. It's designed to teach you plant identification. It also contains probably the most comprehensive set of images of British and Irish plants that you'll find online. It's completely free to use and it's open to everyone. Okay, so here's a flower. If you're a beginner, how do you identify it? How do you narrow it down from several thousand possible species to just one? Well, Name That Plant asks a few simple questions that anyone can answer and then shows you images of possible matches for your plant. I'll take you through it very briefly for this plant, then we'll revisit the process in more detail. First, there are 3 special categories: tree or shrub, water plants or ferns. But it's none of those, so we would go on to the main area of the site. Then, we pick a column according to how the flowers are arranged, in this case single or pair, and then we pick a row according to what the petals are doing, in this case 7 or more and radially symmetric. Then we combine the column and row to give us the button, press the button, and it shows us all the plant families that our plant could belong to, arranged from most to least likely. So we just scroll through until we find it. And look, there it is, right flowers, right leaves, and something picture guides generally don't do, there's useful information right next to the image. The box containing the common and scientific name has a green edge indicating that it's native. For non-natives, like this seaside daisy, they get a pink box. We also have a symbol indicating the most common habitat for the plant, in this case woods. Then we have this simple code for how common the plant is. VC means very common, giving us some confidence that it's likely to be the right plant. Finally, we have a month clock around the rarity code to show us the usual flowering time, in this case MAM, March, April, May. Conversely, this Traveller's Joy or Clematis flowers July to August. I'm filming this in March, so this gives us more confidence that we've got the right plant. Lesser Celandine, Ficaria verna.
So that is a really quick overview by Richard there on using the website. There is a longer video that goes into more detail about how to use, that runs through other examples and how else to use the website. And we will share a link to that. That's a 20-minute video that really digs into how to get the most out of the Name That Plant website. So that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour of a variety of websites and resources that might be useful for you. We will be sharing the links to those websites and videos so that you can explore them yourself. And I'll also put a few bonus websites in there that I think you might want to explore as well that I haven't mentioned this evening. And it may be that you find that some of them are not to your liking or not particularly useful, but I think we all have different tastes and preferences when learning about plant identification. And so explore them and find out what works for you. So that's everything I've got to share. Do we have any questions?
Wonderful. Thanks very much, James. Let's have a look if we have any questions coming in. Give you all a chance to type something there. Just to let you know, I have been popping your links into the chat for those who are here with us this evening, but they will also be added to the YouTube video when it goes up, the recording on our YouTube channel. But also, we have been running this little Padlet that we've been adding questions to and answers to. So we'll put the links to the Padlet as well. So I've put the link here in the chat too, so that you can have a see. And that's going back right to the beginning with all the Q&A questions we've been having all the way along as we've been going through. So fantastic. So we don't have any questions coming in. Looks like you've totally overwhelmed everybody with all the wonderful resources, and I'm sure they're really sort of chomping at the bit to go and explore them, hopefully, because there is so much out there, which is really, really good. Do you have a favorite video around plant ID on our YouTube channel, James? Put you on the spot.
I do. I mean, I'm hesitant to recommend it in a sense, but there is a really wonderful video on the BSBI YouTube channel about a really, really, really difficult group of plants called water crowfoots. And I recommend to you, don't look at water crowfoots. I mean, look at them, appreciate them, don't try and identify them, and don't watch this video that I'm talking about. But as somebody that has got to the point in my botany that I'm tackling some water crowfoots, that video by Nick Stewart is a really, really useful resource. And I've probably watched it, I don't know, half a dozen times. I've rewound it, rewatched it with a specimen in front of me, trying to identify it. And you will probably find over your botanical career, you will find that some videos which are useful now, you'll just get it stuck in your head and you don't need to double check. And other videos will become more useful for you over time.
Great. That's nice to know. I'm going to go check that one out. So we've got a question, and I think this one's again about AI and the use of these auto ID apps. So we've got a question about Obsidentify and PlantNet. Do you have any thoughts or experience with those that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I have tested a few different plant ID apps. In fact, we had a wonderful article in BSBI News, our membership magazine, about different plant ID apps. And indeed, we had a talk about different plant ID apps, which is available on the BSBI YouTube channel if you want to go and find out more about that. And that ranked different apps on how good they were at plant identification. So things like Google Lens is not as good as something like PlantNet. PlantNet is one of the better ones. Flora Incognita is another one of the better ID apps as well. I think that AI identification has its place. I'm not somebody that's going to say, oh no, anything involving AI is bad. But I also think that part of the wonder and joy of engaging with botany and recording is learning. And I think, and I'm not saying that anyone here is doing that, but I think it's using AI apps in the right way in moderation. What I'd always suggest is trying to come up with an idea of what a plant is yourself, using a book, using a guide, thinking about the species, and then use the app as a double check. Bearing in mind that whereas the apps are often right, they are definitely sometimes wrong. So that double check isn't always the most useful thing in the world. But I mean, I've done it myself. What was it I was looking at the other day? I saw something and it had no flowers on it. It was just leaves. And I looked at the leaves and I went, I'm pretty sure that is that species, but I can't remember off the top of my head. And I took a picture of it and I put it in the Plant ID app, and the Plant ID app came up with the same identification I had in my head. And I thought, great, that's a nice double check that I'm probably right about that. So at the same time, I think so, if you see something totally unfamiliar and you don't have a book on you, you don't have the time, use a Plant ID app to have a look at it, and then next time you see it, try and identify it yourself based on your previous identification. So there's my very convoluted answer to what I think of those ID apps.
Yeah, that's great. I think moral story, I suppose, always check what it says using other sources before you submit any records that have been based on it. And I think that paper that you're talking about in the BSBI news didn't actually look at the iRecord auto ID feature in any way, because that's relatively new and it's improved quite substantially, I think, in the last few years, hasn't it?
Yes. Yeah. So I can't say how well the iRecord AI kind of ranks amongst them, but it's certainly I submit a lot of non-plant records through iRecord, and it's very, very good on butterflies and ladybirds and moths and things like that, very impressively so. And I assume it's similarly pretty decent for plants as well. But it's always
Yeah,
going to
it's not
depend
too
on
bad.
the quality of the photo that you
Of
put in
course.
as well, which is why if you haven't seen our talk on taking plant photographs that we did a few weeks ago, brush up on that one, because high quality photographs will get you better identifications from these things.
Great. Okay, so we've got another question about plant names, and I think this is about the fact that plants have their names have changed. I suppose their scientific names change all the time, and they'd like to know, is there an up-to-date resource where you can see what the latest plant names are so that you can check with old books and stuff like that?
Yes. So there isn't a resource kind of deliberately designed for that purpose, but Plant Atlas is a fantastic resource. It's funny, isn't it, that because scientific names are meant to be the common and consistent and used across the board names for a species, and common names are the ones that people might call something different elsewhere. But actually, it's interesting. The scientific name for a frog orchid has changed, and yet a frog orchid 50 years ago is still a frog orchid today. So sometimes the common names have remained a little bit more consistent than the scientific names. But what I'd recommend is if you're not finding something in a book, or you're concerned that the taxonomy has shifted, type it into Plant Atlas. Plant Atlas is also pretty good at recognizing older synonyms for species, by which I mean if a scientific name has changed, it can also recognize older names and give you and still find the species for you. So yeah, Plant Atlas is a great resource for that.
Wonderful. And then I noticed that we've got someone in our audience who's actually a bit of a a superhero at the moment. He's been taking part in 100 Plants, but also in Identiplant, and he submitted a record to our record that turns out to be a very interesting species, the Aerophylla one. James, you know a little bit about that one?
Yes, I have heard tell that there has been through the 100 Plants Challenge, there has been a discovery of a plant that has never been found in a county before. So, a record of glabrous whitlow grass has been found in County Derry, where in the entirety of botanical history, it has never ever been seen before. So a really interesting and significant plant. That is a native plant that has never been found there before. So it goes to show that more people looking, taking pictures, submitting records, there are so many discoveries yet to be made. And I'm sure that amongst the nearly 20,000 records that have been submitted so far, some of those records will be of things that have never been seen in that 1 kilometre square monad, that 10 kilometre square hectad. There may even be other new hectad records, maybe things that have been refound after a long time. A bit like when I was showing the map with the bird's nest orchid, there may be things that people are spotting that nobody has recorded in a long time. So it's going to be really exciting to kind of work through all this data that all of you have been submitting to find out what discoveries have been made.
Yep, really, really exciting. So, yep, so congratulations to them. And I think that's all the questions we have this evening. So we'll come to an end there. And thank you all for joining us. And all the links, as we said, to all those wonderful resources that James shared tonight will be sent around to you in the follow-up email, as well as associated with the recording on YouTube and on the Padlets. So hopefully no one can miss them anyway. And good luck exploring them. Thank you so much, James. It was wonderful.
Thank you very much, Chantal, and keep recording, everybody. It's absolutely amazing what you're achieving.
Wait, we've got one question. One question's come in last minute.
Oh,
Okay. How do you know if it's a native plant if it's not been found there before?
what a good. So, glabrous whitlow grass, Aerophylla glabrescens, is a native plant elsewhere in Britain and Ireland, and it's an under-recorded species. It was a species that was only, and this is one of those taxonomic changes we were talking about. It was originally it was split off only in the last few decades, and so our understanding of its distribution is patchy. So its discovery in County Derry is broadly in line with its native distribution because it has been found elsewhere in Northern Ireland. And so there's no reason to suspect that it has appeared in Derry as a non-native. It's not a garden plant. It's not something people plant in, it's a very small and subtle species. So it feels like on the balance of probability, it's a native plant that's probably always been there. And we have only and one of the 100 plants participants is the first person to have spotted it.
Yep, great. So hopefully that's answered your question, Heather. And I think also if you want to find out whether something is native or not, I think the definitive list is on Plant Atlas. You can go for each of the species, can't you? And it says native, or maybe it was brought in the last 400 years and therefore it's slightly non-native but still not an alien and so forth. So all those definitions are on the Plant Atlas. Let's check a plant out to see whether it's actually classified as native. Okay, well, I think we'll try to leave. That was a last minute question. Thanks, Heather, and thanks everybody again. Thanks, James. Let's close it
Good
there.
night, everybody.